Hello and welcome to the eighth video interview, which is a part of the series of ECMI Conversation with Experts. Each episode, we invite a prominent expert in the field of minority studies to discuss a specific topic with one of the ECMI researchers. My name is Viktoria Aygül. I'm a researcher at the European Center for Minority Issues, and I'm delighted that today I can talk with Dr. Giulia Isetti from Eurac Academy about the topic of the Russian community in South Tyrol, religious practice and digital tools. I would like to say also a couple of words about our presenter today. Giulia Isetti grew up in Genoa in Italy. She studied classical philology at several universities in Italy, Germany, and England, and received her PhD in ancient Greek in 2013. After further studies in business administration and some professional experience abroad in Germany and Belgium, she has been living in Bolzano since 2017, where she works as a senior researcher at Eurac Research. Her research topics span various fields with a special focus on sustainability, resilience, religion, and digitalisation. She is also passionate about literature and theatre, and she has recently a chance to combine her professional and research interests. So she was in fact involved in a project that combining theatre and science had the aim to raise public awareness of climate change, as well as to seek through participatory processes to understand how we can transform our society into a caring one. But in today's conversation, we are going to talk about the issues, how the Russian community in South Tyrol forms their identity, what are the tools they use in order to save their identity online. So we are going to talk about the connection between the Russian community online and digital aspect. What is the role of the Orthodox religion and the digital media for the community, and how the members of this community enacted religion during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the first question I would like to ask you, Giulia, is why have you decided to choose this topic of research? Why Russian community and why particularly Orthodox community became of an interest to you?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Regarding the topic of research, well, it's a weird story maybe as a research topic, because usually there's a call and then we draft a project. But in this case, well, first of all, the project is based on the Russian community in South Tyrol. I'm not from South Tyrol, so when I came in the region, I was immediately struck by this community because, I found out there was a church and a physical building where they met, this house Borodina. And I found out that these buildings were there since the 19th century, and they were used already there at that time for the Russian community. And so you have to think that Italy has a very recent migration history. So it's a country where people migrated from and not migrated to till the last 30 years. So it was very interesting for me to see that there was a community that had such a long history, because the Russian community is still in these buildings after 150 years. So it was a very long span. And of course, I immediately thought that, well, it's worth investigating. So this is the story, how I came to this topic. Religion at the beginning was not the main focus, but of course there's a church, which is one of the very few dedicated Orthodox churches in Italy. And it was very close to this building. So of course, religion then very soon in the process of research came out as a very important element for the community.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit more about the profile of the community and whether you had actual access to the Russian community in South Tyrol?
Mm-hmm. Well, the community, first of all, I have to say that it's a small community. So you don't have to manage the biggest minority in South Tyrol or in Italy. Quite the contrary, it's pretty small. Of course, it's very difficult to have the official numbers. the official numbers say in South Tyrol, which is a small region in Italy, maybe that's also worth mentioning, it's 259 people, I think. But of course, since the majority of these community members are women, I think the ratio between men and women is 1 to 4. So for every man, there are 4 women. Then there's a natural process of integration. So women tend to marry Italian men, and therefore they disappear from the statistics. So they acquire the citizenship, the Italian citizenship, and then it's very difficult to find out really how many Russian there are. So this was one of the first difficulty I had, of course, how to get into such a small community and to find participants, to find respondents to our interviews. So the first point of contact, of course, as I said, there is this building which has a cultural association within, and they are very active. They organize a lot of cultural events, musical events, all kind of artistic events and so on. So of course, this was my entry point. I asked them for further contacts, and we had to use a snowball sampling method, which is pretty difficult to reach these communities. Other characteristic of this community is that the fact that they are very well educated. So I spoke with respondents that had 3 or 4 degrees, academic degrees. So this is, of course, something also that's exceptional if we think about comparing other minorities in Italy and in South Tyrol. So there are people that have a higher educational level than the Russian average and also of the Italian average. And as I said, they are very culturally active. So they are really engaged within the Russian community, but also with the hosting community. And they also have one characteristic is they have a strong willingness to integrate and to engage with the hosting community, which is the South Tyrolean community. And it's not easy for them, I have to say, because it's already difficult to integrate in a hosting community, a normal one, but South Tyrol is multicultural. So there are the majority of the population, even if we are in Italy, is German speaking. So Russian speaking people have to integrate within a community who speaks English, who speaks German, who speaks Italian, who speaks Latin. There's also a very small official language, which is Latin. So for them, it's very difficult to integrate. Even Italians have difficulties, I have to say, in South Tyrol sometimes. It's, of course, very enriching, but it's a challenge because they have to learn more than one foreign language when they settle down in South Tyrol. So these are the main characteristics, I would say, of the Russian community.
Oh, this is very interesting. And how did you structure your work with them? What were the main challenges with this regard?
Mm-hmm. So as I said, since it's so small, this community it was very difficult to find the respondents in the first place. And the cultural association was the entry point. We used this sampling technique, this snowball method. And this was the first problem. Of course, we had to be selective. We couldn't, interview a whole family and so on. So it was really sometimes challenging to do that. It was challenging to find men. As I said, there are so few. So we wanted to have different voices. Of course, we knew we couldn't have a representative study. So it was more exploring the voices of people there, but we wanted nevertheless to find people with different age groups, with different gender, different stories also, or how long they were in South Tyrol. For example, it was easy to find people that were here since, 25 years, but people that just arrived and maybe that didn't speak either German or Italian or English, that was challenging. And only one person in our team could speak Russian. So this is also, of course, a difficulty because people are also more comfortable if they speak their own language.
Right.
So, of course, this was another obstacle. But at the end, I think it was a very interesting process. And we had actually 2 tranches of interviews. So we started the project in 2019. After the pandemic, I wanted to perform follow-up interviews to find out what happened during the pandemic, and especially in regard to the religion. So how were they enacting religion during the pandemic? And of course, it was difficult to persuade the same people to participate twice because there are many women which have a very high workload and family load, care work at home with children and so on. During the pandemic, it's pretty challenging. So they didn't have time to participate. So I had to invite other people in addition to the old ones. So yeah, again, recruiting participants was the main difficulty, I would say.
Right. And speaking about the funding, what is the role of the Orthodox religion for the Russian-speaking community in South Tyrol? What did you find out?
Well, as I said, religion at the beginning was not the main focus. We were more focusing on a sense of belonging for this kind of community, as I said, because the receiving community is so different, so diverse culturally, how they were engaging with these difficulties. So religion was not the main focus, but as I said, it really came up very quickly as an important factor. And I remember one respondent saying, yeah, when I found out that there was a church here, I was very happy. So my soul was saved, she said. And she also said that that was the point of reference for her Russian word. So even for people that are not so religious, church that was always named as a very important factor, not only because of the fact that, so when you migrate to a country, of course, you lose all your social networks. So you lose your friends, you lose your relatives, your family, your work colleagues. So to have the possibility to practice religion physically there, of course, was very important because it was for their well-being, psychological and spiritual was very important. But also it was important social because they knew already before coming that there was a church there and that they could get there and meet Russian people, Russian-speaking people. This is also an important factor because it's also a bridge between the Russian community and other communities from other Orthodox countries, for example, Moldova or Romania and so on. So it's really an aggregation point. And also you had to think there are many women that came here with children and so on. So they really found there people with the same background, with the same problems. There are a lot of, as I said, mothers with children, and they kind of found there people with the same problems that were willing to help, to support each other. So with the children, with advice, you should go there and there. So it's really socially very important also, the church, not only spiritually. So this was the two phases of religion that we found out that were vital for the community.
And how was that projected online?
That's a very good question. So first of all, I have to say that we found out already in the first tranches of interview in 2019 that the community members are very digitally skilled. So as I said, they have 2-3 degrees. So they mostly have a work which is, white collars works, jobs. So they know how to use digital media, but they actually chose not to use them for religion because they didn't want to, not because they were not able to. It was really a decision not to use them because for several reasons. So they were named very different ones, but at the end, none of my respondents were, practicing religion online. Either because they were, as I said, white collar jobs. So they were already all day long in front of a computer. They didn't want to engage also for religious reasons with a computer, or because they thought it was not Orthodox. This was also very interesting. So it's not proper religion if you perform it online, according to some respondents, or because they didn't felt the need. So I have to say, not so many. Almost all respondents were religious, but not, let's say so. They could also live without services or religious services, and
Right. And did the COVID-19 situation change anything with this regard? Because some practices were transferred maybe online, or I don't know. This is very much connected to my own research on Russian Orthodox community here in Germany. And what I observed was that it was not also much going on online. So it's very interesting pattern, so to say, to see that the same is going on also in South Tyrol. And even though the pandemic was in place still there was not much going on online. And from the perspective of creation of the safe space online, then probably would you estimate the online digital space as a safe space for the Orthodox community, or would you rather say that it was just somehow sharing the general messages online, on how much was going on online, so to say?
Mm-hmm. I would say almost nothing. So they used, for example, digital tools for communicating with each other, or even with the priest. There's a priest in Merano, and they communicated one-to-one. There was not, for example, chats with all faithful. And they would use these tools to maybe get appointments with the priest, to book a place in the church, because of course there are some limitations in place. For example, you cannot have more than 20 people in the church at the same time. So they would use these tools to book a physical place in the physical church, but digitally nothing happened. So one or two told me that they looked for digital religious content online, but it was more like, one told me I felt like a tourist, so I was just there to look how it was and so on. But there was not the creation of an online community. And the priest has a web page, a Facebook page on the internet, and there he posts photos of the services or prayers or information regarding the physical practice of religion. And people do not really engage with that. So maybe they like it, they say a few things in the comments, but it's a typical example of what Helland would call the religion online. So it's just a one-way kind of communication, and people do not engage, and there's not really a community online, as I said. And yeah, so I'm afraid online doesn't happen so much. But it's, as I said, a choice. It's not because they cannot. It's really, they don't feel the need.
Right. I was wondering, do you think that there are other platforms, like you chose Facebook, right, for your research? Whether there are any other platforms that are actually contain the active participation? Maybe there are some Instagram pages or some WhatsApp groups where people actively discuss or participate, or try to exercise their religion.
I asked them what they use, and they told me they don't use anything, because they maybe, if they looked for religious services and so on, they looked for religious services in Russia, not organized locally by the priest, for example, who didn't offer that. Maybe in their home country, they were looking for some particular services in special occasion, for example, Easter or Christmas. But this was really an exception. So, and Facebook and other chats and so on, maybe they have chats for diverse community, let's say, so niche, so mothers or I don't know what, but they do not really engage in religious content. It's more practical information. That's what they told me. Of course, as I said, we couldn't interview everyone. I'm sure there are different experiences within these small communities, but that's the results we got. So they really didn't do that, and they didn't want to do that.
Right. Another question that popped up into my mind was that whether you saw any connection between the Russian Orthodox Church and the local church.
So I spoke about this Facebook page, and here the priest not only does it post, for example, prayers and so on, but also reposts from the Patriarch Kirill. And again, he takes the content and he puts it there without changing it or anything. So, Heidi Campbell speaks about different categories of themes that come up when you practice religion online. And one of the categories is authority. And it was clear that authority is not put into discussion. So the patriarch is the patriarch, and no one can add something to that. So it's really, it's not really discussed, and it's accepted as it is, and nothing challenges that. So this was also interesting. But this is very similar to what happens to the Catholic Church, because we also conducted a parallel study on the Catholic Church in South Tyrol. In this case, we interviewed actually the priests and the priest in South Tyrol, and it was the same thing. So they really engaged very little with digital tools, And if they did, it was mostly in the case of religion online, as I said before, for the Orthodox Church. So they were, sharing information, sending links, sending prayers, and so on. But nothing more. And the authority of the Pope or of the Patriarch is not really put into discussion.
Right. Were there any reactions, like likes or reposts from the members of this group?
Yeah, but very few. So some
right.
likes and some small comments and so on. To be honest, I didn't perform analysis. This is just my impression because I was surfing on the Facebook page because our research methods were the interviews. So just out of curiosity, I had a look at this Facebook page, but I didn't really analyze it.
Yes.
Right.
You were talking about the heterogeneous group of Russian-speaking community. I was just wondering whether all of them are following this group on Facebook, because there are probably different representatives from the Russian-speaking community, right? Coming from Moldova or Ukraine or Russia or Kazakhstan or any other post-Soviet countries where Russian is a lingua franca. Are they all members of this group? Or because I know that, for example, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is now separate from the Russian Orthodox Church. Whether you noticed that from your research at that stage?
Mm-hmm. So our research question at the beginning, the first tranche in 2019, was on the Russian nationals. So also, for coherence, we also in the second tranche focus on the Russian nationals. So we didn't interview people from other countries, even if they belong to the same Orthodox community. Of course, this connection with other communities came out in the interviews because they engage with each other. Of course, they have this common ground, which is the faith and the fact that they have a migration background with same problems, as I said, same challenges they have to face. So solidarity and so on. So this, of course, is there. I didn't interview, as I said, anyone from other countries. So it's difficult for me to, really find out the experience of other minorities in this context.
Right. You also mentioned that the identity was not only the religious identity, but you had some intersectionality, right? So I was wondering, what were the identity markers that became visible during your research while you were interviewing the target group? Was gender important, for example, in these intergroup relationships? As you mentioned, there are more women as men. Maybe there are some more interesting findings.
Language was a very important identity marker, and we have different approaches, to be honest, in this regard. So there are people that find very important to, for example, teach Russian and also to grow the children into an Orthodox faith, and others that prefer to speak Italian, for example, with the children and to bring them to the Catholic Church. So there are two different approaches. However, I would say that language is very important. And also maybe mothers that don't want to speak Russian with the children, they go to the cultural events, they go to church and so on to hear Russian. So the language is very important for their identity, and they really engage a lot in these cultural activities, literature events, and so on, because it's very important. They also have a Russian school to teach Russian to their children, but also to children of Italians. So they open the course also, of course, to other children, because language, as I said, is very important for them. And then the physical places are important for the community. They really appreciate the fact that there's the church. And there's this building where there's, for example, a library with Russian books and so on, where they meet. So many cultural events are in this building. So this is also a meeting point, but also an identitary place where they identify. So this is also important for them. And then festivities are named as not only because of religious reasons, but where a place where they meet and where they I don't know, they enjoy the same food. For example, for Easter, they told me that they meet there and each of them brings something typical, and also tasting the food is important for them to remember how it was in their homeland, and also to have this something in common around themselves. So this is also important.
I was wondering, did they mention any kind of challenges while being a community in South Tyrol? Do you know about that? Whether they experienced some challenges or face some, I don't know, trouble?
Well, one of the first that comes to my mind is the fact that, yeah, as I said, South Tyrol is very diverse. So the fact that they have to deal with German-speaking people, Italian-speaking people, Ladies-speaking people, this is not only a question of language, it's also sometimes very cultural differences, of course, between German and Italian speakers. So sometimes they have difficulties in dealing with all this, changing, let's say so, contexts. So this is one point. And then, especially women that married Italian or German-speaking men, they, of course, have problems maybe sometimes integrating with the friends of the partner. This also was named by some respondents. And from the working point of view, many worked still for Russia, for Russian communities, for example, for Russian, communities of Russian companies. Mm-hmm. So this, of course, maybe hinders or slows down the integration process because they work online, so smart working for Russian companies. So, of course, this doesn't make it easier to meet new people, to meet South Tyrolean and to integrate. So this, of course, it's good for them to have this opportunity, but at the other hand, it's like they're in Russia and it's difficult for them to meet people, and so that's another reason why it's so important is the religious community, because it's there where they can meet friends and build new relationships.
Right. What are the possible follow-ups for your research, and do you have any further plans?
Well, I concluded the interviews in February before of the recent political events, and this, of course, is another disruption. So COVID was a reason why we performed a second tranche of interviews, and of course, this political situation is another disruption that is worth investigating. So I'm sure, I hope not, but I'm sure that the situation has brought some problem for the community. I guess maybe, I don't know, I'm just, I don't have any data because I didn't have any contact with them after the invasion, but maybe there's the risk that they got some discrimination from the South Tyrolian population. It could happen. I'm sure there are some tensions with the Ukrainian community, which is very big in South Tyrol also because we are getting a lot of refugees. So the Ukrainian community is growing, and of course it would be interesting to see how they are now engaging with each other in Italy. And how are the relationship with Russia now? Because we have seen during the interviews that there are strong relations with relatives and friends in Russia. They speak daily with them. And it would be interesting to know how these recent events impacted also the Russian community. So how they are seeing from this point of view the invasion, what they think, are they supporting of the government, or rather they prefer to distance themselves. Of course, all these topics are very interesting to investigate.
Yes, right. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the very interesting interview and for sharing the outcomes of your research and your recent publications, right, with us, with the ECMI. And I would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
And I would like to thank our online guests. And for more interesting information on what the ECMI does, please follow us on our social media and visit our website www.ecmi.de. Stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, goodbye.